Democratic Nimadan, Union Tanja, Pretam Yakamia, Gujanoro, Min Twin, Niaragaro. Degree British Parliament Martinoro, Daw Suu, Daw Mekun, Piojama, Pepare. A good Kana Madeo Lajara, Guna Prama by Marajanoro, Prode, Winjito, Tebe Camerani, Video, Daw Suu, Ki Ujoso, Gavare. Now Cameroon when I gave you a good diggy than a chop Ginibare. A dinner day out at Tema General, Britain, Winnie Hong, or Brown, let we have it. Also, let's see, so I put Winnie got a general, the let's see Winnie Joe, David Cameron, now call me my tiny Jabare. The Reno Yadia Ragaro, General Piempa Pokuri, and the General, the Kama de Mabrisha Barim Mazgapura Solution, Daw Suu, Stroke Ham Yap, Piempa Pokuru, let the Abarame. General Megungoro, Daw Suu Megungaro, Nima Sano Nya, Shinai, Donze Minima, General Duani Video, Daw Suu and Megon, Bio Jama, Chepare. Prema Vaimara General, Daw Suu Megon, Masating, and Mado, the British Balimanga, Amatuga, Yinzon, Pio Jama, Chepare. So General Gu Kana Masagi, Mingwin, Regule, General Daya told him Yada beat her up to the select shoesa. Java, come here.
This hall has hosted many events over the past 900 years. In recent times, only a few international figures, Charles de Gaulle, Nelson Mandela, Pope Benedict XVI, and Barack Obama have spoken here. Today, Daw Aung Suu Kyi will become the first figure other than a head of state, the first woman from abroad, and the first citizen of Asia to do so. This is not a break from precedent without a purpose. The courage of our guest is legendary. She has withstood the unimaginable suffering of separation from her family and her people with a dignity, fortitude, and resolve which most of us can barely conceive. Her connections with the United Kingdom, reinforced in Oxford yesterday, are intimate. She has been the symbol of resistance to a regime which, even in an imperfect world, has been exceptional in its barbarity. As the United Nations has documented, and from 3 trips to Burma's borders, I can myself attest, this is a cabal guilty of rape as a weapon of war, extrajudicial killings, compulsory relocation, forced labour, deployment of child soldiers, use of human minesweepers, incarceration of opponents in unspeakable conditions, destruction of villages, obstruction of aid, and excruciating torture. Burma has become a beautiful but benighted land where fear runs through society like blood flowing through veins. One woman has now defied a dictatorship of such depravity for 2 decades. That is why Daw Aung San Suu Kyi, a leader and a stateswoman, is with us here in Westminster Hall this afternoon. However, there is room for cautious optimism. The recent election to Parliament of our guest, accompanied by 42 of her colleagues, and the release of many political prisoners are welcome signs of reform. We earnestly hope that further and fundamental reform will ultimately lead to the freedom, democracy, and rule of law which we have so long enjoyed and the people of Burma have too long been denied. There is an Asian saying to the effect that a journey of 1,000 miles must start with a single step. We are proud that one such step will be taken in this Parliament today. Parliamentary colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it is my privilege to welcome the conscience of a country and a heroine for humanity, Aung San Suu Kyi.
Lord Speaker, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Prime Minister, my Lords and members of the House of Commons, thank you for inviting me to speak to you here in this magnificent hall. I'm very conscious of the extraordinary nature of this honour. I understand that there was some debate as to whether I would speak here in this splendid setting or elsewhere within the Palace of Westminster. I welcome that debate and discussion. It is what Parliament is all about. I have just come from Downing Street. It was my first visit there, and yet, for me, it was a familiar scene, not just from television broadcasts, but from my own family history. As some of you may be aware, the best-known photograph of my father, Aung San, taken shortly before his assassination in 1947, was of him standing in Downing Street with Clement Attlee and others with whom he had been discussing Burma's transition to independence. He was pictured wearing a large British military-issue greatcoat. This had been given to him by Jawaharlal Nehru en route to the UK to protect him against the unaccustomed cold. And I must say, having not left my tropical country for 24 years, there have been the odd moments this week when I have thought of that coat myself. A couple of hours ago, I was photographed in the same place where my father was photographed, together with Prime Minister David Cameron, and it was raining. Very British. My father was a founding member of the Burmese Independence Army in World War II. He took on this responsibility out of a desire to see democracy established in his homeland. It was his view that democracy was the only political system worthy of an independent nation. It is a view, of course, that I have long shared. General Slim, commander of the 14th Army, who led the Allied Burmese campaign, wrote about his first encounter with my father in his memoir, Defeat unto Victory. The meeting came towards the end of the war, shortly after my father had decided that the Burmese Independence Army should join forces with the Allies. General Slim said to my father, "You've only come to us because we are winning," to which my father replied, "It wouldn't be much good coming to you if you weren't, would it?" Slim saw in my father a practical man with whom he could do business. 6 decades later, I strive to be as practical as my father was. And so I'm here, in part, to ask for practical help as a friend and an equal, in support of the reforms which can bring better lives, greater opportunities to the people of Burma who have been for so long deprived of their rights and their place in the world. As I said yesterday in Oxford, my country today stands at the start of a journey towards, I hope, a better future. So many hills remain to be climbed, chasms to be bridged, obstacles to be breached. Our own determination can get us so far. The support of the people of Britain and of peoples around the world can get us so much further. In a speech about change and reform, it is very appropriate to be in Westminster Hall because at the heart of this process must be the establishment of a strong parliamentary institution in my own country. The British Parliament is perhaps the preeminent symbol to oppressed peoples around the world of freedom of speech. I would imagine that some people here, to some extent, take this freedom for granted. For us in Burma, what you take for granted, we have had to struggle for long and hard. So many people in Burma gave up so much, gave up everything in Burma's ongoing struggle for democracy. And we are only now just beginning to see the fruits of our struggle. Westminster has long set a shining example of realizing the people's desire to be part of their own legislative process. In Burma, our parliament is in its infancy, having been established only in March 2011. As with any new institution, especially an institution which goes against the cultural grain of 49 years of direct military rule, it will take time to find its feet and time to find its voice. Our new legislative processes, which undoubtedly are an improvement on what went before, are not as transparent as they might be. I would like to see us learn from established examples of parliamentary democracies elsewhere so that we might deepen our own democratic standards over time. Perhaps the most critical moment in establishing the credibility of the parliamentary process happens before Parliament even opens, namely the people's participation in a free, fair, inclusive electoral process. Earlier this year, I myself participated in my first ever election as a candidate. To this day, however, I have not yet had the chance to vote freely in any election. In 1990, I was allowed to cast an advance vote while under house arrest, but I was prevented from contesting as a candidate for my party, the National League for Democracy. I was disqualified on the grounds that I had received help from foreign quarters. This amounted to BBC broadcasts that the authorities considered to be biased in my favor. What struck me most ahead of this year's by-elections was how quickly people in the constituencies around Burma grasped the importance of participating in the political process. They understood firsthand that the right to vote was not something given to all. They understood that they must take advantage when the opportunity arose, because they understood what it meant to have that opportunity taken away from them. During the years that I lived in the United Kingdom, I never had the right to vote myself, but I can remember, even during my university days, that I was always trying to encourage my friends to exercise their right to vote. It was never clear to me whether they followed those instructions, but it was clear to me even then that if we do not regard the rights we have, we run the risk of seeing those rights erode away. To those who feel themselves to be somehow above politics, I want to say that politics should be seen neither as something that exists above us, nor as something that happens beneath us, but something that is integral to our everyday existence. After my marriage, I constantly preached my gospel of political participation to my late husband, Michael. I still distinctly recall the occasion when a canvasser knocked on the door of our Oxford home during an election campaign. Michael opened the door, and when he saw the gentleman poised to deliver his campaigning pitch, he said, "It's no use trying to win me over. It's my wife who decides how I should vote. She's out now. Why don't you come back later?" The canvasser did come back later, mainly, I think, to see what a wife who decided how her husband should vote looked like. It has been less than 100 days since I, together with my fellow National League for Democracy candidates, was out on the campaign trail across Burma. Our by-elections were held on April the 1st, and I'm conscious that there was a certain skepticism that this would be another elaborate April Fool's joke. In fact, it turned out to be an April of new hope. The voting process was largely free and fair, and I would like to pay tribute to President U Thein Sein for this and for his commitment and sincerity in the reform process. As I have long said, it is through dialogue and through cooperation that political differences can best be resolved, and my own commitment to this path remains as strong as ever. Elections in Burma are very different to those in many more established democracies such as yours. Apathy, especially among the young, is certainly not an issue. For me, the most encouraging and rewarding aspect of our own elections was the participation in such vast numbers and with such enthusiasm of our young people. Often, our biggest challenge was restraining the crowds of university students, school children, and flag-waving toddlers who greeted us on the campaign, blocking the roads throughout the length of towns. The day before the elections, on my way to my constituency, I passed a hillock which had been occupied by a group of children, the oldest about 10 or 11, their leader standing at the summit holding the NLD flag. The passion of the electorate was a passion born of hunger for something long denied. Following Burma's independence in 1948, our parliamentary system was, of course, based on that of the United Kingdom. The era became known in Burmese as the parliamentary era, a name which, by the mere necessity of its application, speaks of the unfortunate changes which followed. Our parliamentary era, which lasted more or less until 1962, could not be said to have been perfect, but it is certainly the most progressive and promising period until now in the short history of independent Burma. It was at this time that Burma was considered the nation most likely to succeed in Southeast Asia. Things did not, however, go entirely to plan. They often don't in Burma and indeed in the rest of the world. Now, once again, we have an opportunity to re-establish true democracy in Burma. It is an opportunity for which we have waited many decades. If we do not use this opportunity, if we do not get things right this time around, it may be several decades more before a similar opportunity arises again. And so it is for this reason that I would ask Britain, as one of the oldest parliamentary democracies, to consider what it can do to help build the sound institutions needed to support our nascent parliamentary democracy. The reforms taking place, led by President U Thein Sein, are to be welcomed. But this cannot be a personality-based process. Without strong institutions, this process will not be sustainable. Our legislature has much to learn about the democratization process, and I hope that Britain and other democracies can help by sharing your own experiences with us. Thus far, I've only spent a matter of minutes inside the Burmese Parliament when I took the oath as a new MP last month. I must say that I found the atmosphere rather formal. Men are required to wear formal headgear. There is certainly no heckling. I would wish that over time, perhaps, we will reflect the liveliness and relative informality of Westminster. I am not unaware of the saying that more tears have been shed over wishes granted than over wishes denied. Nevertheless, it is when Burma has its own satisfactory equivalent of Prime Minister's questions that we will be able to say that parliamentary democracy has truly come of age. I would also like to emphasize the importance of establishing requisite parliamentary control over the budget. In all this, what is most important is to empower the people, the essential ingredient of democracy. Britain is living proof that a constitution does not need to be written down in order to be effective. It is more important that a constitution should be accepted by the people that the people should feel it belongs to them, that it is not an external document imposed on them. One of the clearly stated aims of my party, the National League for Democracy, is constitutional reform. Britain's original constitution was drawn up following the meeting between my father, Aung and Clement Attlee here in London in 1947. This constitution may not have been perfect, but at its core was a profound understanding of and respect for the aspirations of the people. The current constitution, drawn up by the military government in 2008, must be amended to incorporate the basic rights and aspirations of Burma's ethnic nationalities. In over 60 years of independence, Burma has not yet known a time when we could say that there was peace throughout the land. At this very moment, hostilities continue between Kachin forces and the state armed forces in the north. In the west, communal strife has led to the loss of innocent lives and the displacements of tens of thousands of hapless citizens. Since this speech was drafted, I've also heard that hostilities have resumed in the east of the country between Shan troops and the troops of the government. We need to address the problems that lie at the root of conflict. We need to develop a culture of political settlement through negotiation and to promote the rule of law, that all who live in Burma may enjoy the benefits of both freedom and security. In the immediate term, we also need humanitarian support for the many peoples in the north and west, in the west, largely women and children who have been forced to flee their homes. As the long history of the United Kingdom shows clearly, people never lose their need to preserve their national or ethnic identity. This is something which goes beyond, which supersedes economic development. And that is why I hope that in working for Burma's national reconciliation, the international community will recognize that it is political dialogue and political settlement which must be given precedence over short-term economic development. If differences remain unresolved, if basic aspirations remain unfulfilled, there cannot be an adequate foundation for sustainable development of any kind, economic, social, or political. Britain has for so long, under successive governments, including the present Conservative Liberal Democratic coalition and the previous Labour government, been a staunch and unshakable supporter of aid efforts in Burma. I hope you can continue to help our country through targeted and coordinated development assistance. Britain has been until now the largest bilateral donor to Burma. It is in education in particular that I hope that the British can play a major role. We need short-term results so that our people may see that democratization has a tangible, positive impact on their lives. Vocational training and creation of employment opportunities to help address Burma's chronic youth unemployment are particularly important. Longer term, Burma's education system is desperately weak. Reform is needed, not just of schools and the curriculum and the training of teachers, but also of our attitude to education, which at present is too narrow and rigid. I hope also that British businesses can play a role in supporting the democratic reform process through what I have termed democracy-friendly investment. By this, I mean investment that prioritizes transparency, accountability, workers' rights, and environmental sustainability. Investment, particularly in labor-intensive sectors, when carried out responsibly and with positive intent, can offer real benefits to our people. One test will be whether new players will benefit from the investment coming in. Britain has played an important role in facilitating the forthcoming visit next month of the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative Secretariat. I hope this will be the start of many similar initiatives in the months ahead. It was through learning while at Oxford about two great British leaders, Gladstone and Disraeli, that I first developed my understanding of parliamentary democracy. I learned the basics, that one accepts the decision of the voters, that the governing power is gained and relinquished in accordance with the desires of the electorate. That is the system which goes on, and that ultimately everyone gets another chance. These are things taken for granted here in Britain. But in 1990 in Burma, the winner of the elections, the NLD, was never allowed even to convene parliament. I hope that we can leave such days behind us, and that as we look forward to the future, it will be the will of the people that is reflected faithfully in Burma's changing political landscape. This journey out of Burma has not been a sentimental pilgrimage to the past, but an exploration of the new opportunities at hand for the people of Burma. I have been struck throughout my trip by how extraordinarily warm-hearted and open the world has been to us. To experience this firsthand after so long physically separated from this world has been very moving. Countries that geographically are distant have shown that they are close to Burma in what really matters. They are close to the aspirations of the people of Burma. We are brought into proximity through our shared values, and no geographical distance, no human-made barriers can stand in our way. During the years of my house arrest, it was not just the BBC and other broadcasting stations that kept me in touch with the world outside. It was the music of Mozart and Ravi Shankar and the biographies of men and women of different races and religions that convinced me I would never be alone in my struggle. The prizes and honors I received were not so much a personal tribute as a recognition of the basic humanity that unites one isolated person to the rest of the world. During our dark days in the 1990s, a friend sent me a poem by Arthur Hugh Clough. It begins, I think many of you will know it, "Say not the struggle naught availeth." I understand that Winston Churchill, one of the greatest parliamentarians the world has known, used this poem himself as a plea for the United States of America to step in against Nazi Germany. Today, I want to make a rather different point, that we can work together, combining political wisdom from East and West to bring the light of democratic values to all peoples in Burma and beyond. I will just read the final verse. I was advised that the whole poem was far too long. And not by eastern windows only, when daylight comes in the light. In front the sun climbs slow, how slowly, but westward look, the land is bright. I would like to emphasize in conclusion that this is the most important time for Burma, that this is the moment of our greatest need, and so I would ask that our friends, both here in Britain and beyond, participate and support Burma's efforts towards the establishment of a truly democratic and just society. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to address the members of one of the oldest democratic institutions in the world. Thank you for letting me into your midst. My country has not yet entered the ranks of truly democratic societies, but I am confident that we will get there before too long, with your help. Thank you.
San Suu Kyi, on behalf of the House of Lords and everyone here today, may I express our collective and heartfelt thanks for your inspiring words. We all espouse freedom and democracy, but few of us are called upon to pay for and uphold these principles by spending 15 years in detention. Your presence here today is a testament to your courageous approach of steadfast non-violence and reason in the face of an oppressive, powerful, and determined regime. Your struggle has reverberated around the world. It has forcibly reminded us that free and fair elections, a free press, an independent judiciary, and the institutions of civil society are the cornerstones of democracy and individual freedom. We take these freedoms for granted at our peril. Democracy is never won once and forever. It is a process requiring constant vigilance. Today, you've reminded us of the struggle that must continue in Burma and elsewhere. In post-war Europe, we have seen that it is possible for countries to make the transition from totalitarianism to democracy, and I trust that this will give you hope and encouragement for the journey ahead. Your stand against repression has been at the heart of the National League for Democracy's struggle. I'm sure that at times during your long campaign, you must have felt unbearably lonely, though as you yourself have said, the Nobel Peace Prize allowed you to feel part of the international community. And indeed, through you, your people and your country were always in our minds. Now, together, we must use this occasion of your address to fellow parliamentarians to renew our own determination to be part of the struggle for liberty, whenever and wherever it arises. Thank you.